questions, the major push on the rates, I mean, just not only just since we haven't done a rate study since '93, but was to simplify, to really get things simpler, easier to understand for customer, easier to understand for finance, something that works a lot better. And part of that switch is to work into metered billing. So more and more commercial will, in the next couple of years, you know, and hopefully a bunch this year, we'll get them all switched, a lot of them, but we'll switch to meters and do a metered billing rather than trying to do the ERU billing where it's a guesstimate and what numbers and who gets a third or a half or a whatever they are. So it should be much simpler, you know, and I'm sure there's some bugs we'll work out. A good thing we have with working with GovRates is Brian's been really good about adjustments. We can look at this as we get some others. It's a pretty easy adjustment if we want to do that in a year or two, to go through it again and just be sure we're either collecting enough or not, or collecting not, hopefully we don't collect too much. And if we do, then we can make those adjustments fairly simply. So that's where we're really going with it. It's been a really good study. Brian's been great to work with. He'll do a presentation tonight. What we looked at with the time we had, since it was kind of a little bit more of a push with extra work sessions for you guys tonight, was to try to get it done fairly soon. But we want to allow you guys questions and changes or anything there might be there. So what we looked at, and Brian may go over it again, but it's basically 10 minutes presentation on that to buzz through it, then 10 minutes on the water tariff, 10 minutes on the sewer tariff, and that leaves time for either in between or after for council to either make suggestions or questions or whatever it might be. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian unless anybody has any quick questions for me before that.
Madam Mayor, you have Casa Grande and Cease on the line.
Thank you. I do have a quick question. So is there anything specific you need from us tonight coming out of this meeting, or is just this questions and comments as we go, or like at the end of this, is there some direction you need?
Yeah, the direction, and I kind of put it in the heading as we started. The idea is what we'd like to get tonight is to get pretty much finalized or close to it so that we can bring you a final version. And that would be, I was trying to do it for February 22nd on the next meeting, but with the public meetings, we need 3 weeks. So it'll push to a month from now. It'll be March 8th. So that allows us time to get that ready. And then the implementation of the rates would go in on April 15th. And we worked that with finance to find out what would be a workable time and date. And that seemed to be when they were doing other changes, and it would work right into them. Okay. And so that's the plan right now, is to hopefully implement rates on April 15th, but you'll see it again March 8th.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And Brian, I'll turn it over to you. Hopefully I can see you up there, but hopefully we can hear you.
He's muted.
Brian, are you muted?
Can you hear me now?
Whoa. Hold on. That was that commercial.
Well, that was
That's a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Lots of feedback, Brian. We're just trying to get it. There's a real echo, so let us, he's working on it here.
Yeah.
You want him to keep talking or just step in here and there, or what?
Brian, can you try joining on phone audio instead of computer audio?
I am on the phone audio.
Okay. Do you have your speakers muted on your computer? Oh, now you're muted again.
Remember the good old days when we just had meetings?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice?
Kind of missed it.
Cannot wait.
Did she bring me a phone?
No.
hope we can get him, he can cover it a lot, we go through, he's just a little,
Brian, do you wanna try again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, now you're
much
good.
better.
Oh.
Back up.
Just speakers in.
Yeah, can you make sure, don't mute yourself in Zoom, but make sure on your computer the speakers are muted. I think that's where the feedback's coming from. Now your microphone is muted. There we go. No, I'm still getting feedback.
So the other option might be if he disconnects like the phone.
If he could just call,
Yeah,
calls
can
in.
you maybe, Brian, let's try exiting out of Zoom and call in on the phone. He disconnected, hopefully he'll be back on.
Okay. Can she hear me if I speak?
She can hear you, yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna text her.
Rissy, if and when you need to speak, can you raise your hand, because we can't move you into the panelists. You're just logged in as an attendee.
So while we're waiting for him to reconnect, Doug, do you want to start or talk about any changes that you've made from the last time? You just went over the schedule, so after tonight, you'll bring this back to us on March 8th.
Correct?
Will that be for, are there ordinance changes or it's just a tariff change?
It's a tariff change,
Okay, so it
Yeah.
won't have, it
So
won't
it's a
be.
resolution,
So we can
but
just
for
do it in
public.
one meeting?
yep.
Okay.
Yep, so we'll be able to come back with that. The water sewer study, I think it really went well. There's a lot of material on the study when you just look at it, but when you really get down to the tariff, for the water rates, the water rate tariff, most of the charges are gonna be on page, it'd be page 4 of 10 of the water tariff.
Where is,
So that's in the back.
oh, I see, never mind.
Yeah, so you should have a water tariff, a
mind.
sewer
Got it.
tariff, and then a presentation, so,
Okay, so it's page 29 of our packet.
Right.
okay?
Okay, so those are the.
Okay, and so those are the charges, and the differences you'll see are, basically, you just have, for the ERU rating that we have, is only, single-family residence and duplex. So anything threeplex and above is set up to go to metered rates, which those meter rates then show your base charges below for your metered customers is line 2 through 10. We don't have hardly anyone over a 4-inch main that actually has service. There's a couple, but most of them are 1 inch. There's 1.5, 2 inches around for sure on some of the businesses. Something to note that if a business has a 4-inch main to cover their fire water, especially all the new ones, but most of the old ones should then come off of that with a 1-inch or whatever their need is for their actual water service. We don't charge for fire water. So if you had to have a sprinkler system go on, that should not be going through your meter on it. So that's something they're definitely on the new builds, it's going in, but there might be some older ones that we have to look at and help out with that, because they're not really using any water and they're trying to run off a 4-inch that was put in years and years ago. Then we want to make those corrections. So we're going through those, and we did take the task from you guys to go look at water meters to try to find all the sizes. Are they listed as correct or incorrect? They're doing very well getting those done. They're just, like I said, it's going to be a bit here as we wait for some other businesses to get back open where we can get in to actually physically check their meters and go through them. But we're logging all those down. We found some that are listed as larger than they are, and others that are listed very small, 1-inch, and they're actually a 3 or 4-inch. So we'll get those corrected, and a lot of it's from older buildings, you know, and most of it from, you know, several years back where they just have never gone through and checked them or got back. So, you know, as customers get it, they can feel free to definitely call Public Works anytime. I mean, if they're there and they'd like their meter checked to see what it is, what their line size is, we'd be more than happy to come and check it and get it straightened out, because that's part of our inventory that we're trying to get. So we can look at those, but on these rates, and something that I really like the input and the feedback we're getting from some folks. Sea Life Center, Tara had called about some rates, and she thought they were an 8-inch service, but when you look at the base rate, just their base rate for an 8-inch would have been $1,300. The change that helped us catch that I didn't really push hard on. I'm really for a base charge, so we keep an infrastructure charge, and that's part of how we keep things moving. But that's as much as their water usage charge on a big service. And so we may need to cap that, and that's what we're looking at, either capping it. But in prior years, prior to now, this was listed as a minimum charge, not a base rate. So if they didn't hit that, they get charged the minimum charge. But almost everybody always hit their minimum for their line size. So, and that may be something we have to look back, and we're really talking, after talking with Sea Life and some others, that might be something we may have to look at. How do we do a rate, and maybe it's just go ahead and make them as minimum charges, and as they hit them, but what that would do is then may increase the volumetric charge. Right now the volumetric charge would be set at, for this year, would be $5.85 per 1,000 gallons. So I mean, it's a good rate, but it may have to jump, say, to, let's say we don't do these base rates, we just do them as minimums for those businesses, so they're not that negatively affected. They're still going to be paying a little higher rate on the water. So if it raises up, you still are able to capture that, but maybe it's a little more fair. So that's something we're looking at, a change to go through. And that's what the input, like I said, I'm asking for on these work sessions, and folks even who, if they call in prior to, or any time on it, if they've got ideas or concerns, yeah, I want to hear them, because we're trying to get it right. We just want to get this to I talked to our new finance director, actually just through email, didn't talk to her on the phone, but about rates, and she said she was just coming from a system that was everyone is metered, and it was one rate, period. There was no breaks for extra usage or penalties for extra usage. A lot of the folks, or a lot of the communities you see lower 48 are very much having to do water rationing, and so you're really trying to reduce consumption so you don't give them a break. In some communities, you pay extra the more you use. It's increasing. I like the simplicity, and we can make even that type of thing work. So those are things we're just going through based on what we had. I think we've come a long way trying to just get away from that whole ERUs for every different building and have to go check this, and it's just a tough one to understand, so we're trying to get to that, and
Am I unmuted?
Oh,
There you
great.
are.
Okay, well, we'll let you start off then, thank you.
Okay, well, just to kind of supplement what Young said, certainly rate making is a balancing act, and what we're trying to do is reflect community values, and we often have competing objectives like revenue stability versus low income affordability. Those are all, potential objectives. I can tell you, as Doug was kind of, alluding to, there are virtually unlimited possible rate structure options. And as Doug mentioned, one of our key objectives has been to simply simplify the rate structure and tariffs. And I can tell you that the type of rate structure that is proposed is the predominant the predominant type of rate structure that you see in the industry, and it is you're just having the base charge and the usage charge that is just referenced in all of the standard rate making manuals that are referred to throughout the industry. So this is a very common rate structure, and as we talked about, it also provides some simplicity. And certainly a key takeaway is that to the extent that changes in the rate structure are made to benefit certain customers or classes, other customers have to make up the difference, and therefore we have this balancing act. And so since the last work session in December, we have been working hard to fine-tune the recommendations and proposed policies, and also to develop an implementation plan that includes providing cost reimbursements to customers that are proposed to be switched over to metered service. And as Doug mentioned, we're hoping to have some final direction from council on proposed rates, and then have some finalized tariffs for you at the March 8th council meetings. But certainly we've had a lot of discussions on this, and as you're aware, we've listened to council feedback and made some adjustments. And so, one thing that we wanted to, I think Doug talked about a lot of the different some of the changes, but if we look at page 1 of 10, we've got the kind of the proposed implementation plan for providing cost reimbursements to for customers that are proposed to be switched over to metered service, which is anyone over a single, so unmetered. What we've as the presentation, earlier in that page, it talks about how the customers eligible to be unmetered include are proposed to be the single-family residential customers, and then duplexes, apartments, bed and breakfasts, and townhomes with no more than 2 living units. And so, for any other customer types that need to be switched over to metered, that are proposed to be switched over to metered service, we're proposing an implementation plan that's kind of outlined that's starting on page 1 of 10 toward the bottom. So that meter installation, as you can see, if a customer initiates a meter installation through December 31st of 2021, up to $300 of the meter installation costs would be if they provide a valid receipt, they could receive reimbursement for up to $300 of meter installation costs, which should cover most of it. And the meters and the meter readers would be provided by the city. But then, as if after this year and subsequent years, each year the the reimbursement for the meter installation just gradually decreases. So that provides an incentive for these customers to connect earlier, to switch over to metered service earlier. But it also, provides a mechanism for them to do this as painlessly as possible. And so I think everyone was pretty much on board with the metered, switching over to metered service to the extent practical, because certainly there's been a lot of issues with the current rates where the ERU based rates are people have switched over to metered service, and they've recognized significant savings on their utility bill, which suggested that the current rates just are not very realistic. And so what we're proposing to do, and this is a we had nothing has changed on the proposed revenue adjustments as far as the revenue that we're trying to target in the rate structure design. But what we are proposing to do as far as an implementation plan is to make a rate structure change, make rate structure changes in 2021, and then have across the board increases in 2022 to 2025 while we monitor, and when I say we, whether it's done internally or you hire an outside consultant, recommending both monitoring revenue collections, and we do recommend performing another rate review once the city has 1 year or more data under the updated rates. Certainly with the transition to metered service, there's we're going to start having metered usage from customers that were previously unmetered. There could be water conservation, and so we would want to just see where we're at after making a change in 2021. And then, as I mentioned, just once and the city staff should know when a good time to look at the rates would be. But meanwhile, we have a 5-year plan. Until we can do another review, we have a 5-year plan in place to allow Public Works the necessary revenue in order to complete the critical capital needs. And as you're aware, in previous discussions, we talked about how the system has serious renewal and replacement needs, and how we've already taken a good hard look and kind of isolated the capital project costs that are the highest priority, and those are reflected in the plan. So that's. Did I miss anything, Doug?
No, I think that was good. I know there was one question that somebody had raised their hand quick, or Mayor Terry, did you have?
How much are those meters expected to cost?
It depends on the meter size, but typical 3/4 to 1 inch meter, that size, it should be right in the $250 to $300, and that's with the reader. So the reader's that's $100 in there, so it's right in that area. So 250, 300 might be just a hair over that, but we have that in the capital program also as part of built into these rates and everything to cover up to $300,000 for these meter replacements. So it doesn't just fall on go get a meter. That way we also are able to, by us buying them, hopefully we capitalize some savings on buying some bulk on the meters themselves and have them in stock, but we also get the good meters that we need to keep things rolling. So that's the plan with the meters.
So I have a comment and then 2 questions, I think.
Okay.
So my first comment is on that March 8th meeting. I think that it should be, I know it's a resolution and it doesn't require a public hearing, but I really think
It does.
Okay, good.
It's
So
public
we will,
hearing.
since it's a tariff, it'll have a public
Yep.
hearing. Okay. And then, so they talk about Exhibit 1 and 2. And then it says, on page 2 of 10, customers are required to be metered, the adoption of this tariff and the rates per ERU in Exhibit 1. So are the exhibits correct? Will it have the definition of what an ERU is? I know that that was in the former tariff, but I don't see it
I
here.
believe the exhibit one is referenced to be the former tariff.
Okay, so the.
So it'll fall back to that former tariff, but there is a, Brian, would you recall the, I know there's a
Because then
reference in
there's
there.
another Exhibit 1, it says the multi-year schedule of rates for metered customers is in Exhibit 1. So,
Okay, exhibit one is page
yeah,
4
20,
of 10.
yeah, so page 4, but, so that's
I
where,
can see where you're coming from, and Exhibit 1 basically has the rates for ERU,
right,
but the ERU determination methodology is in the previous rate tariff, so maybe we need to just add, if that's maybe we can wordsmith that a little bit more if it's but that was the idea, that the determination methodology is in the previous tariff, but the rates are actually in the Exhibit 1 of this one, but we
Yeah,
can certainly
so-
wordsmith and try and
so, because I don't want to lose that definition if that's what we're building all of this on, and so, because it says on that Exhibit 1, the number of ERUs for such customers, so it kind of dances around that, but there's a lot of confusion already with ERUs, so I don't want to lose that. So I just want to make sure Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2, when it refers back to them, because it does say, where did I see that? Yeah, on page 2 of 10, you know, it seems like Exhibit 1 is referred to in a couple different ways, so, okay. So I think that,
in Exhibit 1, the rates that it's referring to are actually in the footnote. It talks about there's like a little asterisk and a bracket that says that any metered customers shall be determined, the number of ERUs shall be determined by the ERU determination methodology in effect prior to the adoption of this tariff. We can make sure that there's
that needs to be
like I said, we
included.
can wordsmith a little bit.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, I think that
Make sure
needs to be included
crystal
for
clear.
clarity.
Right, and the asterisk there on page 4, if you go down a little past halfway, there's a line goes across, and at that asterisk, and that's the reference to any unmetered customers that are required to be metered based on the customer
Yeah, no, I
classifications.
see that, but there's no
So-
definition of what an ERU is in this document. So that's what I think
Okay,
is
their
missing.
ERU rate is in there.
Right,
But what is an ERU?
but that's what, we're losing the
Oh,
definition
okay,
of the
okay, got
ERU.
you, got you. First page, isn't it, the very first
Well,
thing?
it says, it dances around it. It says, a living unit, a unit of measure used to express the amount of water consumed by a typical full-time family residence. All unmetered water customers shall be assigned one minimum. So you're saying, yeah, I just want to make sure that the definition is tight, because we have so much confusion around ERUs already. We
Agreed.
need to have it be unequivocally clear, so that as people change and staff change, it's so obvious, right? So that's what I'm confused about, a living unit versus an ERU. So you're saying someone with a bed and breakfast that is just renting out one room, that's just one ERU at this time,
Correct.
even if they have 2 bathrooms. So
It's
that's
not-
what
it's
I
not a-
want us to
It's not a
know.
living unit, so that's the thing. If you have a duplex with 2 living units, so we can add that to it. Basically, a duplex with 2 living units would be considered 2 ERUs. The ERU, and we're only talking, we're talking people who haven't changed yet. That's the biggie right here we're talking about, until they get changed over. But any of the rest, it's just duplex and less. So it says 3plex and above is the actual language, I believe, that is supposed to be metered. So until they get metered, those are the questionable. The idea is, hopefully just in a couple of years, get rid of the ERUs other than just a single family and a duplex. And
So
if
then maybe that's, I just think it's confusing. So and then my second point is that I think when this comes before us, we need to have the old tariff with the strike-throughs. Maybe that's not possible, but the old tariff with the strike-throughs and the new, so that the public can see what the changes are.
Yeah, we tried that. initially, but it was such a mess
Overhaul.
that we kind of gave up. So probably the best thing to do would be to just put them side by side so you can see them. But I mean, there are so many it's just such a large amount of changes that it was just a huge mess.
Okay, I hear that.
I think the one thing we have to look at too when we say a strike, for folks that, let's say they have a 8-plex and they haven't switched to meters yet, it's still, depending on what that unit is, refers back to the 2020 or the 2019 tariff, which then has all that language. That's how they get billed, is off that previous
Right,
tariff.
but somehow it needs to be an exhibit or included in the tariff,
Right,
because right now it's
I think
not.
this could be, the current tariff could be an attachment to it.
Yeah.
And that would give you all the information for what exactly charges our ERUs until you switch to the metered rate.
Okay, yeah.
And I think we did
Yeah, I
plan
mean,
to attach that, and I'm sorry that's not clear.
Absolutely. We can add an Exhibit 3 that shows the previous ERU methodology, and then and then we'll reference that Exhibit 3 in the rate tariff. And I know originally we were kind of trying to deep six that tariff because it was just so wordy and convoluted, but that could be maybe the next step. The next time you adopt a tariff, that Exhibit 3 or whatever we call it can be finally laid to rest.
Or if it makes more sense to just include a new definition in the new tariff, do that. I mean, I'm not gonna dictate how it happens, but I think it just needs to have a good definition in there. And then I'm monopolizing the time. I know Councilmember Demas, did you have any comments? And then I'll go online.
No, I was covered, thank you.
Okay. Does Councilmember Casagrande or Councilmember Cease have their hands raised? Do they want to speak at all? Councilmember Casagrande, did you have questions or comments?
I do. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Really good.
Okay. So this is, I like that the rate study gentleman explained that in order to do a red line strike comparison, it would be such a mess, because we're really going from one thing to another that I find it difficult to even try to wrap my head around what my own bills would look like. But I just did a quick scenario of if my water bill and I'm metered is $350 a month right now, adding the customer charge, which does not exist today, and the increases, my $350 just water, not including sewer bill, will go up to $580 in the next 2025. That's a 66% rate increase for me as a metered user. Whereas as a resident, my bill will only go up 46%. Adding the customer charge is yet another line in our utility billing that makes our utility uncomprehendable and ununderstandable. I feel that with the seasonal nature of Seward, that getting away from a base charge and going back to a minimum usage charge is going to be in the benefit of all citizens. For example, we have a lot of people that own houses in the city of Seward that do not reside in them year-round. So those homes, if they were to get on a meter, which we are encouraging everyone to do, or those businesses that shut down and do not operate in the winter months, will only be incurring their minimum, their customer charge. There will be no minimum charge. And I think that could overall hurt our utility. I feel that this rate study is just once again another go at the city of Seward. I don't know what word to use. Not punishing, but making it difficult to do business, because this is not a fair increase. We're increasing more the metered users, which are small general service and large general service users less than residents, which already have a higher rate. So there's that. And if we're going to be talking about tariff changes, I know that the electric utility has the customer charge in the past that was for the meter reader, that $41 that's on all of my bills was supposed to be justified for the meter reader to be paid their contract. And I remember back when we did a huge split swap of our utility billing, when we did this to the electrical, that customer charge never went away, but yet the meter reader did go away. I know that we do all of our meter reading with a handheld drive-by radio right now. So one of the things that I would propose, if we are going to create a customer charge for our water and sewer, that we get rid of that customer charge in our electric. Because I don't know, like, I just don't know how much more our users will be able to handle, especially since we're in the middle of a pandemic. Cruise ships have been canceled. Who knows what's going to happen with petroleum? And I don't know that right now is a really good time to start putting all this pressure on just our businesses to increase the rates to this degree. I'm supportive of going on meters, but I feel that this is too drastic, too quick.
So you,
So I can't
Well,
support it.
let me ask a question. Would the council support perhaps raising the resident? I mean, obviously the residential customers are your biggest group of customers. You know, the original proposal was to keep the residential rates the same. Would council be open to increasing the residential rates a little bit more? The idea being that, as I mentioned, regardless of the rate structure, we're trying to recover a certain amount of revenue. And you know, if we want to you know, shift some of that cost to the residential customers, we could certainly do that. Maybe even, you know, instead of a 10% water rate adjustment, have a 5% rate adjustment. I mean, if you feel like if the council would be open to that suggestion, it's you know, like I said, there are virtually unlimited possible options.
Yeah, I think going into the study, it was brought to us, and the thinking that had been brought forward was the residents were footing the bill for a lot of the commercial customers. That's why we had taken that advice. I mean, we're trying to take what we're getting from council and public input to work these in, and everybody pretty much agreed, yeah, that's what we're seeing, so let's see if we can do this without hitting the residential customers too hard. We don't want to hit anybody hard. I mean, we're trying to spread it out. You look at some that are just a plain user, like I had mentioned, Jen had said, well, I mean, the biggest customers are definitely going to pay the most in volume because everybody pays the same rate on that system, which is kind of close here other than the charge. And we're certainly not against looking at changing that infrastructure charge to a minimum to see where that we are, and maybe just bumping that volumetric charge a little bit to just at least see where we're at even. I think when he runs those through his spreadsheets, he can come to what exactly those revenues come to, whichever way we do it. And I think there's ways. We've been really trying to listen to the direction from council, which we're doing right now. That's why we're having these. They're great input to get. So how do we want to get to these simplifications in the tariffs to make them not so hard and cumbersome with all the ERUs, and then you still have to have a way to keep the systems running, to keep the infrastructure repaired and going. And so being able to do that you know, takes a certain amount, and that's where that revenue either raises or lowers on either the volumetric charge. If you raise the residential a little, that helps drop the other. So the direction we had before was to not raise residential.
So earlier you talked about the base infrastructure charge is either a minimum charge or a charge and then you add the gallons to. So help me understand.
Currently, in our current tariffs, it's a minimum charge,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, it's, the only time that comes into effect is if you don't use that much water to that minimum charge, then you're charged the minimum charge. Most people use over that, they were set, the minimums were set way low. So it was a deal that it was hard. I mean, when you're talking a fourplex versus a single-family residence at $48 a month, where a fourplex could drop all the way down to 24 if they're not using water. Not, or they can even be, you know, it's just kind of a, we're just trying to keep that fairness where it's not burdening the single family, the smallest ones, but yet not deterring business either. And we're trying to find that happy medium.
So again, clarify for me, in this tariff now, the basic infrastructure charge is the base charge, and then you'll add the per 1,000 gallon charge
Correct.
on.
Correct, so that's how it's in
Yeah,
there
yeah.
before you right now.
And that, as I mentioned, that's the predominant user rate. That's the predominant water and wastewater rate structure, you know, in the United States.
And have you run any example, I'm gonna need to see some examples of how that's gonna impact our businesses? Or have businesses seen what that impact's gonna look like?
Well, we've been trying to put it out and get any input from everybody.
No, I mean like example bills. So I mean,
Have we put out an example bill by grabbing a business? I have not, no.
yeah, so I think it would be helpful for like each one of these folks, I mean, just do like a residential example bill, a couple of these, different sizes of the basic infrastructure charge. I mean, people before they can make I wanna get people's comments and input ahead of time, rather than have this in place and then have everything blow up, honestly.
I agree.
Go ahead.
So what is how much water would you say the base infrastructure charge would cover then?
Well, it's $5.85 divided.
No, the minimum charge, like in 1 month of $40.80, how much, so what's that threshold where you start charging?
Well, at $6 per 1,000 gallons, right? So that's 6
times 7 is 42,
yeah,
it's
7,000
7,000
gallons.
gallons.
So that covers about 7,000 gallons on that particular one. So, like I said, that was brought up to us just going through the Sea Life to really check, and as they, especially with the big meter, that's a big volumetric charge ahead of ever getting the usage charge, right? It's a big base charge. So that's why I brought it up tonight, because that was something that was a minimum. The intent wasn't to punish anybody. And that's why I say maybe we need to change those back to a minimum instead of a infrastructure at this time, and then look at, I mean, I couldn't change it what I was already in, because we already printed this out and sent them out. But to be able to look at that and to react to what we're seeing and what we're hearing from general public, I think it's worth just bringing them back as minimums, maybe looking at through his model and seeing, okay, does that raise up? Do we want to raise, I guess that'd be our biggest question is, do we want to raise residential accordingly, or not? Do we want to kind of keep it the same and then just see where this, maybe it brings our usage rate, instead of, I think it was 585 here, maybe it brings it to 615 per 1,000 gallons. That's, whatever it might be, but per 1,000 gallons, that's $6.15. So it's something that's still, when you look at it, even as a business, depending on how much gallons you use, that $6 comes into play. Currently, they're already paying over $6 for the first 50,000 gallons. After that, it dropped to, I think, $4.98 or something, almost $5 a gallon. So they wouldn't get that drop. It's just a straight 6, whatever we get to. But I think it simplifies it, and it makes it easier to understand too. So that might be something we can work in there.
And we should point out that under the existing rate tariff, the residential charges are really scheduled to be adjusted for an inflationary amount in 2021, and so would it make sense to just go ahead and proceed with that as part of the program?
personally am having trouble looking at this conceptually and then seeing how it practically is gonna impact customers. That's what I'm struggling with.
So some examples of a certain amount of usage, and it's tough to guess, but we could probably get to some that say, here's their usage, here's, I don't wanna put out a business's name
Yeah.
per se, but I think we could say, all right, here's a medium business, if you use 200,000 gallons on average, here's what you're paying now, here's what you'd be paying under the new structure. If you're using only, say, 50,000 gallons, that's a little bit smaller business, here's what you'd be paying. If you used 50,000 now versus 50,000, we could do that to make, if that would help clarify and show everybody what the difference is gonna make in the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, residential, I think it's easier enough because you're just talking about one number.
Right. Right, it's just once you get that volumetric, you know, what are they paying now for how much, you know, if you're only using, you know, if you're using 10,000 gallons a month as a business.
Which, and I guess there's lots of businesses we won't know how much they're using because they're currently not metered.
Right. Right, there's a lot of them that are
And
already are using.
that's one of the reasons for the recommendation of implementing some sort of change in 2021 and then monitoring the response and then determining if any further tweaks to the rate design are advisable.
Yeah, that's easy enough to say, but we're going to be in a world of economic hurt this coming year, and that's tougher to implement to people if there's big changes that we're not aware of. I just don't, I can't see what the ramifications are in a practical manner.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing it out, because that's the idea, is getting this figured out. No one said it's gonna be easy to do these things, and no matter which one you do, somebody's not gonna be happy with it,
Sure.
right? So we're trying to do the best you can, and by bringing this forward to council these times and trying to get your feedback, you can see we've been reacting to your feedback and trying to work in those things. But as you get the new information when it comes in, now what does that look like? And so that causes other feedback or other changes. And so, you know, we're getting pretty darn close to it. So I think if we can, you know, look at these changes, bring you some examples ahead, here's the suggestion, and at that time, if you say, yeah, we agree with that, but you didn't make these minimums, Doug, so we want to make them minimums, and then let's go from there. That may be an avenue to look at, but we'll try to bring the best examples we can. In fact, I think I can send to the clerk some things, some examples, and get them out to you if that's the direction council,
Yeah, and it would be
as a
good
body, would like to see some examples ahead of time.
and get them out to the public, so the public knows what, I mean,
Okay.
we might not have a lot of public input at this time because they might not the public might not see what the ramifications might be. Councilmember DeMoss?
Just one question. If we intend to get everyone on the metered water, I know that when we went on our metered water, our bill went down significantly from when we were on the ERUs. So I wonder, is it better to find out what our situation is going to look like once we get all the meters in before we decide on the rate increase, or what will the timing look like on that, do you think?
Well, I think we can, like Brian said, implement it, and to see whether we implement it at a little bit lower, you know, or, you know, try not to hurt, do the best we can. We can implement it, but then we may have to bump it a little higher than we thought after a year, or maybe we're good. The thing I do see, and all folks that are metered, all businesses that are metered, you become a water conservationist.
Yeah.
You really do. I mean, that's, and that's a good intention, or a good result of metering, is that there's less waste in water. And so folks know that hey, it's costing us a little more for this water. We don't just let it run out the back door here while we're waiting for the next boat to wash or whatever it might be. So those are definitely things you'll see, and some communities, I'm sure that when they put in the full-on meters, saw their revenues drop way down. So that's the other question, is where does it drop? Sounds like we got a question over there.
Madam Mayor, when you're ready, we have two citizens.
Oh, I'll check with the council members on the phone and see if there's further comments from council members, and then we'll go to citizen comments. Councilmember Casagrande, did you have further comments or questions?
I do have a couple questions, and I'll be quick because I want to leave time for the citizens. So if Doug needs to answer this later by email, that's fine. I'd like to know how many metered users we currently have. I'd also like to know how many metered users we are projecting to have in the next up to 2025. And then I'd also like to know about residents that use more water than a normal resident. For example, residents that are using city water for heat pumps. And you can respond by email if you want that, because I want to give the people that are on a chance to speak.
Okay, I can do a real quick on the, how many do we have now? We're roughly about 120, 130. We expect that pretty much to double. I think we've got another 140 that would add to that, right in that area. So I think we're gonna end up with just south of 300 total, 250 to 300 total for meters. The question on, let's see, heat pumps. Residents that have heat pumps, I think we did have something in here that listed on there, so that's going to be a tough thing to look at. But if they have a water-based heat pump that they're trying to pull heat off and then they're just sending it right down the sewer, let me see if I can find that.
No, I was looking.
We have something that we did have put in here.
Doug, it's on page 1 of 10.
Okay.
Under unmetered customers, it talks about.
Oh, there's that
Talk
first
about
paragraph under the two bullets.
Residential and commercial customers that have a heat pump system using city water must be metered.
Oh, okay.
So that would be the metered, if they're, because some of them are not now, they're on an ERU, and if that, I don't know that we have many, and from what I'm understanding anyway, the temperature of our water coming out of our tanks is really cold. They're not really getting much off of the city water right now. Sometimes in the summer they do okay, but in the winter they can't really capture much heat off it. But yes, Rissy, we do have that clause in there that says that they have to be metered.
Okay, and then just one thing, so when it says in that same paragraph, all new construction must be metered at the customer's cost, is that residential and?
If it's residential over threeplex and up, then it would have to, and that's standard right now.
Yeah, so we should make sure that that's specific, because it says, that sentence in and of itself, all new construction must be metered at a customer's cost.
Okay.
It should say something, I don't know how to wordsmith it, but all new construction that requires metering under this definition must be metered at the customer's cost or something.
Okay.
However you want it to say, but just so it's clear.
Yeah, all new construction that meets the criteria for metered must be metered at the customer's cost at construction. We can
Yeah.
wordsmith something in for that. That's fine.
And then, Madam Clerk, let's get those two public members.
The first person is Tara Reamer. She's on Zoom. But I also-
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having this work session and for letting me ask a few questions. I first wanted to thank Doug for coming by the center today and checking out what size we had. We thought we were an 8-inch, turns out we're a 4-inch, so it's not as bad. But just running our estimates as a currently metered customer, roughly 200,000 gallons a month, but that varies widely from summer to winter. The swing is kind of from 100,000 to 400,000. My quick back of the envelope is that overnight, if this was implemented as it was, our rates would go up 70%, 70%. And a lot of that is that infrastructure charge, which I get. But the actual, the rate, if you add together the water plus the sewer rate, right now our costs are lower when we use more water, and that's mostly because the sewer rate really drops right now after that. But if you look across our typical year right now, at our heaviest usage, our rates for just the water, not the infrastructure charge, would go up by 3%. And in our slowest time, it would go up 36%. That's just the consumption numbers. And when you add in the infrastructure, it's up 70% across. And one question I had, there's a lot of financial assumptions that aren't in this presentation, and compared to the last electrical rate study that, I know it's been a long time, the calculations were all included in what the public got for the information on that study, which was incredibly helpful to understand some of the financial assumptions, what sort of revenue we're looking at. There's nothing in here that says how much of the revenue comes right now from residential customers versus unmetered businesses versus metered businesses, and I think that would be something that would be super helpful, because my understanding of looking at page 8 of the presentation that has the summary of the adjustments, that for 2021, the combined adjustment for water and sewer is 6.9%, but that's excluding residential. Like, so it's getting a 6.9% increase only on the businesses, because the residences aren't changing in year one, which I think is why businesses are going to see this big jump at the beginning. I have absolutely no problem with the 7 to 8% annual adjustment going forward over the years. I think you need the money to maintain that infrastructure, but I think making the switch in year one, where you're limiting your impact to a very limited number of customers, you need to, and I think you realize this, several of you have already mentioned that you need some scenarios. You need to see how this would impact different types of customers very specifically, and I think that would be a very helpful thing for everyone to see. And I think that's what I had. Thanks so much, and again, thanks for Doug. I emailed him on Friday late afternoon, and he was over first thing this morning, so really appreciate that attention and service. Thanks so much.
Great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Madam Mayor, the next is Linda Paquette.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, she's muted. Okay.
Here, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we
Yep,
can hear
yep.
you. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I tend to get hung up on numbers. And on page 8 in the packet, there's a graph that shows, that the increase is, the combined adjustment over the following years is like 6.97174. But then, if you go to page 22, those numbers are very different, because if you take the percentage increase between 2021 on the first line, the residential unmetered right now, and then the projected at 2025, the 5974, if you calculate the increase, that's a 42% increase. And it pretty much follows in the business side, or rather, yeah, the whole upper section of that, the whole water infrastructure, that percentage is consistent from the 4080 all the way down to the 350880. Then when you look down at the sewer infrastructure charge, it starts out at, I think it's 12% and then 16%, and they're not consistent either. That's the other thing. Even if you look up above, the highest one, it's 42.46%, and then, you know, there's a bunch of numbers after that. They're not the same if you calculate the last line in water, and then they're not the same at all if you calculate the ones in sewer. So I don't understand the chart on page 8 and how that relates to these numbers, because they look to use the same numbers. But the whole water increase seems really high over 5 years. I know if I were a business and I was paying $35.08 now and I was expected to pay over $5,000 in just 5 years, that would freak me out entirely. The other thing, and it's just this is more of a philosophical question, but you know, you're charging them to get the water. Now you're charging them to get rid of the water. I don't know. You know, it almost, it's not quite double dipping, but it just seems like maybe there's a way to do this that would be more comprehensive and fairer. I don't know. But those, I just don't understand the difference between what you're claiming the percentage increase is versus the actual increase that you can calculate right here out of this chart on page 22. Those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Brian, is that something you want to take that question?
Sure. And this goes back to what we were talking about how a rate study is a two-step process. The first step is to figure out how much additional revenue we need, or how much revenue we need to collect. And then the second part is to design rates among the customer classes to collect that specific amount of revenue. And so slide 8 is showing just the increase in revenue that we need, saying that we need 10% extra water revenue, 4% extra additional wastewater revenue. So, and on a combined basis, someone that has both water and sewer service, which is pretty much everyone, but most people at least, the combined adjustment would be 6.9%. So those are just the actual revenue adjustments we need in order to fund those critical capital needs. And then, as I mentioned, the second part of the study is to figure out how to adjust how to recover those revenues among the different customer classes. And as several people have pointed out, as you know, if there's no adjustment for residential, then obviously the extra revenue is recovered from the commercial side. And so that's one of the, it sounds like based on kind of the comments I'm hearing is that maybe residential needs to go up a little bit in 2021 to maybe ease the burden on the businesses a little bit.
Did everybody get that answered? Revenues versus the rates, that is a different increase that you're looking at. It's showing what the revenues total is versus now you go to each rate and what they're going to be changed differently to get to that revenue picture.
So Doug, with all these extra questions, do you think we might need another work session before that March 8th meeting, or how did you? What's your thoughts?
I just look at how many work sessions you guys have. I mean, we could definitely bring it back with another one and try to do a quick one if that's something that would help. We could maybe prior to that in the next week get out some projections to you that say, okay, here's what it would be, because everybody wanted to see here's what I pay now versus here's what I would pay under this. We can look at the change of changing back to the minimum charge versus the infrastructure charge. And then what does that do to the revenues, or does that increase the water amount a bit, which it will a little bit. And so those are just two things. The third one is just, what do you think about us? Should we bump residential a little, or just try to leave it and work through this?
And that would be very helpful guiding to get from the city council tonight is whether we can work with the commercial rates, but are you open to increasing the residential rates having no increase in 2021, adding an inflationary adjustment or maybe a 5% adjustment, something other than having no adjustment.
Well, I guess I don't understand, we already had a CPI increase already worked into the budget. Are you saying we wouldn't do that? Why wouldn't we just go ahead and do that?
The CPI, we did put in right now, waiting for this study.
Yeah,
So, and I don't know if Brian got a copy of the 2021 rates yet as
Yeah.
we were going through this. But that's something we can look at, that maybe that could be pulled out. I'm not sure, Brian, if we had that, because we are including that in all those
it
next
is.
5 years.
So the
It's in-
residential rate
that's
that you're
included.
proposing includes that CPI already?
Yes, the residential rates includes the bump for the CPI each time, and it did just bump. And it's based on the prior 5 years, and that's what we had set up in council years and years ago, so it didn't have to always keep coming back. It was a thing that just averaged the last 5 years, so we don't get hit with a 14% CPI or a negative CPI, so it was in a 5-year average. So that's already in, that's gonna hit the residential ones. Brian, does it, I believe it's already, it bumps the residential, is going up, it's just this first year it doesn't go up from where it's at. But I think that we could look at that to see if that rate that was in this packet at the time included the,
No, because page.
I don't think it did.
Yeah, so page 82 says 2021 unmetered residential per living unit is $40.80. But then on this, page 29, it has the monthly charge per living unit at $48.96. So there's some sort of bump already worked into it, right?
where was the $40 one?
Well, it's on page 22 of the presentation.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the infrastructure base rate. But you're right, then that's for infrastructure
But
charge.
that says unmetered residential per living unit, so isn't that the ERU that we're looking at over here?
Right, and I'm sorry, that is confusing.
Yeah.
The infrastructure charge, it would be the charge to if you were to shut off your water for the winter. So that's an infrastructure charge. You don't gain a lot on the residential end, you'd still be paying 40 instead of 48.
You know, I guess the other thing is maybe we need to,
So there's some clarifications we
Yeah.
can definitely keep. I mean, that's part of this process, is to get it, clear as we can get it for everybody, and I think there's some good things we can look at to try to clarify these. I don't think Brian has any objections to what we've learned tonight as we've gone through this.
Well, I'd like to have us come to some.
Absolutely. So for residential, we will reflect because for residential, we kept our message. The message is consistent with what we talked about in December.
Right.
And so since that time, the city has been moving forward with a CPI adjustment for residential. We will reflect that in the proposed rates for 2021. Or for 2021.
Would that help anything for the commercial rate that we have?
Yeah, it would help somewhat.
Okay, we'll put that and put some examples and get that added in so we have it. I guess I would leave up to council if you want another work session, or if you want, how do you want to handle it?
Councilmember McClure.
Well, I just wanted to speak for the residential customers because I thought it was pretty clear, at least. I thought we made it clear before, and also every time that we've raised residential rates, people scream that I would like to see, I mean, this I think is a fair increase. I don't think we should put any more on the residential
Yeah.
people than what's being proposed. I think there's got to be a way of fixing the businesses a little bit better, but I don't see us putting any more on the residential. So I may just be one, but I don't think that was a council consensus.
I agree with Councilmember McClure on that. I would like to see some examples maybe, so
Yeah.
people can really just kind of see how it is gonna affect their bills, so they feel comfortable speaking out and giving their opinion on it. But if we've already established those increases for residential, then I think that that's covered.
Well, I just do recall through all the years, every time the annual CPI increase happened, people were screaming about it. So, and justifiably so. I mean, they're not seeing any better thing. They don't get the infrastructure costs or trying to prepare, but I like the way this is easing it in. I mean, I was happy with this when we first were presented with it, so. I'm not sure that we need another work session. We can just keep throwing things back and forth, but the examples would be good. We could get those and out to the public before we present.
Yeah, I guess for the residential, as long as we're including the CPI increase that's already in place, then I think I'd like to just see that happen and not raise it more so than what's already decided. Okay, is that enough to go on? Okay.
And I'd want to reiterate that however it is that, whether it's through the clerk or however it is for questions to come that we can answer, I'd more glad to answer them before the meeting if that works, you know, we'll make sure we have the public process on that.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, if there are questions, we direct them to you or to the administration?
Well, I think there's been a lot of different personal questions, so
Right.
if it's from the body, maybe it comes through. If it's more from a constituent, your constituents can call too. I mean, if we
Right.
have somebody that has a question, how does this work? Send them over, we'll answer their
That's kind
questions.
of what I wanted to hear.
We'll try to do it, and then hopefully they'll report back, yeah, I got my answer, and I liked it, or I didn't like it.
Can
We certainly want to try to get it out there to them.
Can we put the examples like on the city webpage somehow? Would that be possible?
Possibly,
Okay.
yeah, we could put them on the Public Works, page,
Sure.
department page.
Yeah.
Sure.
And maybe share them with the chamber, so if they need to reach out to businesses, that might be helpful. That's a good forum to reach a lot of our,
Sure.
Yeah, that would be good because then we could advertise the link for people.
Yeah.
again, I'd
Yeah,
just
and
like to
it's-
have all those things hashed out prior to implementation, and we can see where we're at.
And we might have just made it without technical difficulties, but sorry, we overran you guys a little bit.
That's okay,
So,
it's good stuff.
if you have more, I'm glad to answer, but,
Well, we'll end that first, thanks Doug.
okay. Thanks,
We'll end
Brian.
the first work session and we'll go to the second, which is discuss a request for proposal for a forensic audit. Are we getting our, okay. So, does he need to call in? Is he already on the Zoom?
We have Grant Todd on the, online.
Hi Grant, did you want to walk through, the RFP that we have in our packet? Go for questions. I don't know if you saw council members, lay down, but I'll turn it over to you to start.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Tara, I think that was you.
Yes,
I
thanks.
recognize your voice.
Thanks for joining us tonight. We
Perfect, thank you.
appreciate it.
Oh, of course, you bet, happy to help. So I'm sure most of you are aware, so for those of you who don't know, this is, I'm Grant Todd, I'm an audit partner with Alden Rogers and Company. We are engaged to your audit, but administration had asked me to help look at this RFP, maybe help, give them some ideas or form some kind of a basis for the RFP. Administration and I also met with Councilmember Casagrande and Councilmember Demas a couple of weeks ago, kind of to talk about the RFP, make sure that we had everything as close as possible to bring to your, to the full council for your review. Part of it, just kind of a little background since we have the full group. I was sent it's called the letter of intent, or the intent letter that the council had given to administration about coming forward with a forensic audit, and so administration and I talked, and even with the council members, the difference between a forensic audit versus more of a, an internal audit or an agreed upon procedures engagement. We spent some time talking about that. Really the biggest difference, usually in a forensic audit, I sent a couple of the council members, a really nice breakdown from an international CPA firm on the difference between a forensic audit and an internal audit. And it just kind of talks about a forensic audit is an examination of financial records to find any illegal financial activity, while an internal audit or, an agreed upon procedures engagement would be an examination of the company's accounts or activities. So
they kind of, I know they ultimately have the same goal in mind, you know, in talking to the council members. The goal is to see, you know, how many errors exist. And talking to council members, it seems that there's been some errors the last 3 years. You know, they came forth with a number of errors that have been brought to them, even some of their own bills. And so I think probably everyone's in agreement there are errors that are taking place in the billing process. You know, and so, the same thing, it's up to the council, you know, what level you want to look at. You know, the current RFP is written to say, you know, on page 2 under scope of services, under number 1, the last paragraph, a review of every monthly invoice issued to residential, commercial, and industrial customers. The one thing I wanted to point out, you know, and I just had run some numbers, that is roughly 100,000. So if you assume 2,800, you know, and the RFP says 2,900, and my calculations I was using 2,800. I apologize, I didn't update those. But if over the 36-month period, that's nearly 104,000 transactions if you were to continue with the RFP as written. We threw out a couple numbers, you know, as part of our audit, we look at a sample of transactions. As part of our testing of the billing system, we looked at 40 transactions, which once again, out of, you know, 36,000 a year, it's a tiny sliver, but that's something, you know, our sample size are determined by the AICPA. But I estimated that if, you know, just whether it's my firm, in granted, we, as your, you know, the way the RFP is written, my firm isn't even going to propose on it because we don't have any CFEs, but that doesn't, you know, is irrelevant to me. I was just trying to put together how long I think it would take to look at each individual transaction. And so I assumed, you know, 3 minutes was probably, and it's so hard to know how long it will take to look at a full transaction. Once again, it comes down to how in-depth the council wants to get on each transaction, whether it's, you know, looking at a meter reading compared to the bill, and then trace to the general ledger, then trace it to the rate that should be charged at the time. So anyway, I just came up with a breakdown, but if you assume each one takes 3 minutes, you can look at 20 transactions an hour. If you're looking at every transaction of 104,000 transactions, it comes to 5,200 hours. And that's, you know, so that's a pretty big engagement. You know, originally I said, you know, because once again, when we were talking to the administration and a couple of council members, kind of throwing out numbers, I assumed that an average billing rate for a CPA firm, you know, I said our average rate for a staff member is 110. You know, just for this purpose, I lowered it to 100. So even if you're saying 5,200 hours times $100 an hour, you're looking at, you know, a $500,000 engagement. So my biggest thought to this RFP, the way it's written currently, is you would probably want to cut it down and either take a sample. Once again, we talked about picking 1 month out of the 3 years, 1 month per year. We also talked about possibly taking 2 months, maybe back to back as it switches from the seasonal rate, you know, when there's the increase or the decrease, just in an effort to get the sample size down just to make it more reasonable. And once again, I know this is 100% up to the council, and I know that's why it's being discussed tonight. I just wanted to, you know, provide some insight, you know, because essentially that's what I've been asked to do by administration and a couple of council members on kind of what I see based on similar work we've done. I mean, you know, in the past, I mean, granted, you know, like I said, we don't do forensic audits, or, you know, myself or none of our CPAs that work for us are certified fraud examiners. And once again, so we won't be able to propose on this. But other than that, you know, the way it's written, I think it's, you know, it's well written based on kind of the information we were given. The only other thing we talked about with the council members is once the audit is done, you know, whether it's, you know, whether you're looking at 100,000 transactions, whether you're looking at 20,000, 5,000 transactions after speed, it's kind of determining how far does the council want to track those errors. Does that lead to, if you say you have a 5% error rate, you know, it doesn't matter how big the sample is, you need to be prepared, I would say, beforehand, or when you're talking to the proposers, is do you just want them to report, here's the 5% error rate, here's what they found, or then do you want them to take it a step further? How long did each of these errors last? When were they corrected? Are they still ongoing? Things like that. And that's the only thing that I think is hard to put in the proposal. And it does say in here, during the course of the initial investigation, the scope of the work may be further expanded or altered. And so once again, I think that's why it's very important. And it does say in the RFP, to include billing rates for the, sense of the workers, the people that will be doing the work. So you can kind of have an understanding on how much further, or how much more expensive, I guess, the engagement will cost. I also assumed, and once again, all the numbers I've been throwing out so far are really just for the review of the individual transactions. I am assuming if I was going to do a similar engagement like this, I'd figure out, how big the population is going to be, how long I think it's going to take, and then add probably another 25 to 50% fee on top of that due to planning, interviews. I think a whole lot of this engagement is going to be based on interviews. Once again, I learned a ton just talking to the two council members about, I think we were just scratched on the surface on the number of errors or, odd things that they had discovered or were aware of. And so I think, interviewing and, having, making sure that whoever does this work spends a lot of time interviewing the electric department, the water utility, the council members, getting a full scope of what they think the errors are, and I think that will help kind of narrow their focus. Not that you want it too narrow, because granted, I think you want it to be wide open, but I think that'll help them get them started. So back to the 25 to 50% fees on top of kind of just the review of the transactions. You have planning, interviews, preparation of the report, the summary of findings, review, all the work that's done has to be reviewed usually by a partner. So once again, I think no matter how big how big or small, the transactions, how many transactions you want to look at will kind of depend, or kind of drive the scope of the engagement and then the cost of the engagement. And once again, 100% up to the council, but I just wanted to provide, like I said, a little insight on that. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions, or I'll do my best to answer any questions on the RFP. Once again, the administration I think did a good job trying to encompass council's wishes. Once again, in talking to the council members, they were adamant they wanted a forensic audit, and so that's essentially what management has brought forth in the RFP.
So I have a question for you. So if say the scope was narrowed down to 2 months in 2018 of November, December, and then 2 months in 2019 of February and March, what do you have any estimate about what that would bring that transaction number down to, that would bring down what the scope of the hours would be?
Yeah, so on my screen, and hopefully everyone can see it, or I don't know if everyone has access to this, I did put that together based on my discussion with the other council members. So once again, at the top, 2,800 transactions per month, times by the 6 months, 2 per year, would get us about 16,800. These different columns, this is assuming 3 minutes per transaction, 4 minutes, 5 minutes per transaction. So if you went with the 3 months, or the 2 months per year, estimated, this is just a rough estimate. I can't say for exactly, it's possible that someone could do them in 2 minutes. So that takes, a little bit off this 840. So that's, same thing. I'm just rough estimate, $100 an hour. As I said, I think the staff members, if we were doing it, would be closer to 110 per hour. But that's kind of a rough breakdown of 84,000. If we took this down to 2 minutes a transaction, you could look at 30, so that, shaves off a pretty, obviously shaves off a third, and that brings it down. And then once again, if you're adding 25 to 50%, on top of that, that would be, this times by 25% would be another, $15,000. And once again, these are rough numbers. It's possible that, the proposers on your RFP are gonna look at these numbers, not that, I'd share these, or they might look at it and say, hey, we can get through the lickety-split a lot faster than, maybe a minute or transaction. I think that would probably be hard to do. Once again, it kind of depends on the scope of how in-depth you want each transaction to be reviewed.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember McQueen.
I just have a real quick question. When you're doing a regular audit, say for us, what percentage, I know that you're selective about what you audit, so what's the normal procedure? I mean, how many transactions or whatever do you normally look at when you're doing like a city audit, like our annual thing?
Sure, great question. So during your audit, your last year's audit and this year's audit, we selected, and we'll again select this year, a sample of 40, which is just a minute fraction. Like I said, you have roughly 33,000 to 36,000 transactions a year just in your billing system related to utilities. We're selecting only a sample of 40 randomly from that. And once again, this is just based on the AICPA, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, their sampling guidance for auditing. And so statistically speaking, if we select a sample of 40 and test your internal controls, the internal controls you have in place, if we test 40 and find 0 errors, that gives us about a 93 to a 95% confidence that your internal controls are working. So once again, that still gives you a 5 to 7% possible error rate. And then once again, there's, no audit is absolute by any means. No organization, especially an organization your size, probably couldn't afford an audit if we, were doing 10% of your population or 20% of the population. And same thing, that wouldn't give us, that still leave lots of opportunities for error in the internal controls.
Great, thank you.
So just a quick follow-up then. So cutting back the number that we're looking at to 2 months for 2 years or whatever, you would still suspect that if there were some fraud or something wrong in there, you would find it just based on that percentage, because that's a lot more, just 2 months, it's a lot more than you normally would look at in a normal audit, correct?
Correct, yeah. It's, like I said, rough estimate, let me just pull this up, we'd be looking at roughly almost 17,000 transactions. And once again, I think it's going to be very important for whoever does the work would be to sit down with at least, at a minimum, the 2 council members based on the information they provided on, the types of errors and the errors they were seeing. Like I said, that would, I think, help drive the focus a little bit. And yes, I think you would definitely, once again, just based on the information they brought forth to me, and same thing, I didn't have any of the transactions in front of me to, to really verify it. It was just kind of, they were talking about the errors that they had seen and constituents had brought to them. But yes, I would say having that information, I would definitely think that yes, you would find, or whoever does the work would find a number of errors. And then once again, I think the council also should determine how far you want to chase the errors. Or, are they isolated? Are they ongoing? Is it a certain type of customers, residential, commercial, X, Y, Z? And same thing, they can extrapolate, that's the beauty of sampling. If they're taking 15% of the population, it's a rough number, and are finding a 5% error rate, you can extrapolate that across the entire population to kind of come up with some ideas on, where the errors are and give you some ideas on, where you need to focus your kind of fixes, if you will, or, changes in the internal control process.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Buckland?
So I have a question. I don't know how the audit process works. It seems to me like looking at each paper bill because the bills are electronic, right? First of all. So wouldn't you try and maybe possibly run that through either a computer program or something that could possibly pull out any errors? Is that possible or is that not possible? I mean, to just looking at each bill, I don't know, like, there has to be, especially for water, we pay like the same thing, right? There's things and, you know, an algorithm or something to things that look right, and then there's something that can pull those out electronically, I would say, right? Also, we audit every month, how many bills? Just randomly?
I don't know. Pam?
What do you mean audit bills?
Randomly, our program, we've been told before that our billing program randomly audits a certain amount of bills each month for anomalies, right?
I don't know where that came from.
So our program does not automatically take out 10 bills and look at them and say like, yeah.
Variances. We run a report every month and it kicks out anomalies, yes. Sorry, I didn't, the audit thing threw me off. But yeah, so that does that automatically and we review each anomaly.
So
if it falls within a regular time frame and regular bill dollar amount, then we don't look at it.
like if somebody usually pays $300 to $400 a month on a total bill and then maybe they're paying $800 this month. Maybe they put a bunch of Christmas lights up.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, something might be wrong.
Yeah, huge amounts of usage with kick a flag, and we just go through flag by flag and we review those.
So already our computer program can notice anomalies in billing. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Casagrande and Councilmember Tomas, do you mind if I throw it to Councilmember Casagrande? I know you both have been working on it. Councilmember Casagrande, did you have questions or comments or ideas on how to proceed?
I think my laydown pretty much summarizes everything of how I'd like to proceed. I'm not sure that Grant had that, so I did email it over to him, so hopefully he has that now. And then I think the biggest thing that stood out to me in the administration's RFP was they really had it narrowed to, by having the verbiage, I don't have it because I've got all my screens filled, but having the verbiage that it had to be an accountant that audits municipalities in the state of Alaska and has a forensic certification. I believe that's only BDO, and I'm not sure about that. I did make some other phone calls to certified public accountants within the state of Alaska that have the certified forensic.
Can't hear you.
Certification and be able to bid on this RFP. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We don't need a firm that is, whatever the first sentence is in administration.
Only firms are...
That first sentence.
Okay, so it reads now, only firms or individuals qualified to perform independent audits of municipalities in the state of Alaska and have certification in financial forensics or as certified fraud examiners. So you do not necessarily need that included.
But just the first part of that sentence, Mayor.
So
before the end.
is there a reason why that was included? Is it because you're trying to meet the forensic audit request?
So we were working through with the audit firm and with the attorney on the right wording to make sure we asked for what we thought council wanted. That's why that was put in like that.
So Councilmember Casagrande, so right now we're asking for a forensic audit, so that must be why you want those certifications. So if it changes to not be a financial audit and a forensic audit and just meet all the scope of work, is that what you're looking for?
Can you compare my laydown sentence, the first sentence
Yeah.
of my laydown to the first sentence of administration's laydown?
Offerers responding to this RFP are hereby notified that all proposals, that's not it.
Which
Number
one?
Number two.
Who may respond?
Oh,
Oh, number 2, who may respond. Only firms or individuals qualified to perform, I think that's,
We pen up independent.
you're saying strike the independent audits of municipalities in the state of Alaska.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't understand you right away. Would that be a problem?
No worries.
Do they have to be,
I have to refer to Grant on that one. I'm not sure what's the or the attorney, what the qualifications needed.
would they need to be?
I don't,
Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think, yes, you're gonna get way more respondents if you take that out, because, Councilmember Casagrande is correct. I mean, the number of firms in Alaska that audit municipalities, especially of your size, is essentially 3. Altman Rogers, BDO, KPMG, and KPMG's exposure to large municipalities is very minimal. I think North Slope Borough and maybe City of Alaska are really the only big ones that I know that they do. So yes, I think if you definitely strike that out, you're going to definitely get a higher response rate. You know, I actually didn't know how many CFEs or CFFs were in the state. I actually Googled it the other day. There's actually way more than I thought. Or, you know, and I don't want to say they're going to be coming out of the woodwork, but there's a large number of, or, you know, at least probably a dozen, you know, smaller, maybe sole proprietors or 2 or 3 people firms that have CFAs on staff. And so, yes, I think striking that at least will help increase your response rate.
Okay. Councilmember Osinka?
So just, is there any difference, or would there be any noted difference between somebody who knows the state of Alaska as far as regulations and statutes compared to somebody from the lower 48? I mean, is there that big of a difference, or is there even a difference between auditing here and auditing, or the way things are done here in our state versus others?
It shouldn't be any different. So once again, when I say we're looking at 40 transactions, it's to test your internal controls mainly. You know, we're not looking at compliance with you know state guidelines. We're just looking at your internal controls. You know, whether it's electric or water rates that are being charged on that specific date, do they match what has been, you know, passed or that everyone's paying? Is it recorded in the correct fund? Is it hitting accounts receivable when the bill is generated, and then when they pay, is it taken out of accounts receivable? When it hits accounts receivable, is it also hitting revenue, you know, in a timely manner? We're really just testing your internal controls, as opposed to looking at kind of regulations and things like that when we're just looking at the controls. But anyway, it doesn't, based on what I understand, you know, you guys are looking for, the council's looking for, it shouldn't matter. I don't think there's going to be anything specific that, you know, the city's doing that's out of the ordinary that you need some extreme or, you know, some in-depth knowledge of the state of Alaska to know.
Thank you. And so, Councilmember Casagrande, those dates I read off with the months, that was in your proposal. You know, as a council, can we agree to take down, instead of years, use those November and December 2018 and February and March 2019? Is there any objections to that?
sounds fun.
Okay, so does that help you, taking out that municipalities of the state of Alaska to open it up?
That would
Council,
be put in the scope of services. We remove the,
Right.
yeah,
yeah.
okay.
And then under the who may respond, taking out the municipalities in the state of Alaska to open that up for more possibilities. The Councilmember Tomas.
You know, we really basically rewrote this, so I don't know, I think I would probably rather work from the laydown rather than the one that was supplied to us. Is that an issue?
So my question would be, is because would that intent and background later become part of the interview process? Or would there be a reason to have that as part of the RFP? And maybe I'll ask, go ahead.
We felt that we were just kind of working off the intent and background that the administration provided us,
Okay.
but changed what we thought we wanted them to know more so and explain what we just kind of you know, fine tuned it per what we felt was more important and just giving them a little bit more information. So,
I mean, I don't have any issues with the laydown RFP. I was comparing the two and it seemed like it, matched.
we made quite a bit of changes.
I have some questions.
Yeah, okay, you go ahead then.
Okay, so, the intent of moving the months is fine. So when it says questions regarding RFP should be directed to Brenda Blue, the city clerk, not to administration. Yeah, I know she can't do that, it has
Yeah,
to go
so
through
that needs to be
administration.
changed.
We can maybe go through the clerk to administration, so the questions, no, can't do that either, okay, so it has to come straight to administration.
Can you talk about where that
Thank
is?
you.
So, because the other thing would be number 6, the contract management, that
Right.
the clerk wouldn't manage this contract either, right?
No.
Is this something that we would create a committee for, or would we feel comfortable just having it go straight to administration is the question?
You should go, in my opinion, you should go to administration.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, can I have one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm fine with that as well, knowing that with this, and this is something that we did change and is in the laydown, that all proposals do come to us. Eventually, we get to see all the bids that came in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just because of the, it's not
No,
like a
absolutely.
normal.
We get the,
Okay.
once we open it up, we open them up here with the city clerk
On the 22nd.
on the 22nd, and there was some timeframes there we talked about, but yeah, we'll open up with the clerk and then you'll get all the proposals. And then we can have a work session on it, decide who we want to go with, and go from there.
Did you have a comment?
I just had a question. If we're looking, I know we've narrowed it down considerably, and that's going to be a huge cost savings. Would there really be any reason to look at residential customers' water and sewer bills?
That was my question.
Because it's the
Does it have to
same
do
every
with bed and
month.
breakfast? Is that why?
Yeah, why?
Go ahead.
Well, there was one account that we found that had, it was a residential, it was a residential account with operating as a business that should be,
Okay.
Well,
So that would be
that should have been,
a business account?
It should, I think it was a business account, it should have been a residential account. It's where the water meter, I believe, was assigned to, one of the residential units, I think, and I think
Okay.
that's where it's at.
I think we're talking about the same one, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
It was enough to make me want to do residential, I
But
guess.
does that, would this kind of an audit
Catch
find that?
Find that?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't-
if I looked
Yes.
at it, I could see it, but I mean, I don't know. That's, I mean, I'm trying to save some cost here, I guess.
I think that we decided that putting the residential in, those would go quick enough, and a lot of the residentials are, 1 meter for a large apartment building, so that's a quick one. And so we were hoping that, that those would actually go quite a bit quicker. I guess, that's something that maybe we could cut out if we get a bid in and it's too much.
We could look at it later then.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then we'd have to worry about the definition of residential. Would duplexes and triplexes
Right.
be counted? So if we just say all the bills, we're saying all the
Yeah.
bills. Councilmember Casagrande, did you have any further questions or comments?
I just have a comment. I personally am not comfortable with administration answering questions and responding to respondents. I would like to see, I don't know if Grant Todd, he already said he can't bid on this because he doesn't have the certification. If maybe that can be him, I don't know. That's just, there's a lot of time between now and then. This is a forensic audit, and that's just my 2 cents on that. If I don't have the support, I'll just drop it. And then the other thing being, another reason why we do want to look at residential is I know that there are folks that have businesses that are being billed as a resident, and it is not their primary residence, if that makes sense. So that is a reason why, say John has 3 utility bills, well, John only gets one of those utility bills to be his residence, is my understanding of tariff, but that's something that it can look in, the audit can look into as well.
Which is just an example. And he's smiling under his mask at you. How about, you know, maybe it's questions to administration and, you know, Grant's good about including other people and other council members. I know with his audit, he did call or left it open to every single council member to ask him questions. You know, I mean, whatever professional firm we hire, they absolutely are gonna bring any issues to us if any are discovered just because of their licensing. But I wonder if in there it's either they also share with the finance committee that we've already set up, or with the assistant, or with the vice mayor, or with the vice mayor and one other council member, or with the mayor and one other council member. I wonder if somehow that can be incorporated into the RFP through, and have it be administration, and then questions get CC'd or something.
I would have to ask the city attorney on that one, is how that would work. So just make sure we're doing things correctly.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi, welcome.
So the RFP is part of a procurement process. And because you're always concerned in a procurement process that the playing field be absolutely level, you usually require questions to be submitted in writing. And the question that one person submits that might be interested in this is made available to every firm that has expressed an interest in it. And you know, as this goes into a final phase, I think you're going to want to have a process where people ask for a packet, right? Because you're not going to put in a 5-page newspaper ad, or however you're going to publicize this. Right. You're going to put in something that's fairly succinct, and then people are going to inquire, and they're going to say, hey, give me the details, because I'm interested. And so then you'll have, you know, something more like this. When someone's interested, they might get 5 or 6 pages and some background and stuff like that. And then at that point, you've identified a universe of, hey, these people might actually put in a bid. And it's pretty important once you reach that phase of a procurement process that you don't have one person getting information that's not available to some other person. And so you try to set up a system where the questions are submitted in writing, they're universally distributed to everyone that's requested the packet, so that to the extent somebody's saying, hey, can you clarify this? What do you mean by X, Y, or Z? That it's not only that person that's getting the clarification, but that it's everybody that's expressed interest in the RFP, and they're getting the exact same answer. That's how you keep a really good, clean procurement process.
So could council...
And if you want to run that through a committee, you can. It won't be quite as, you know, nimble, I guess I would say. And but you can't. But I mean, the point is, there's not going to be like one person, whether it's a council member or it's somebody in the administration, that's talking on the phone with somebody and giving them information that's not available to everybody. I mean, you don't want that. That would be my recommendation, would be you want to avoid a system that could allow that.
So, Councilmember Casagrande, in the RFP, it's questions have to be submitted 5 days prior to the close of the RFP. Are you concerned more so that you want to make sure council has input on answering the questions, or do you just want to make sure that once the questions are answered, council sees what those look like?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that I want council to have as much input in all of this as possible. So I would say yes to both your questions.
How's that gonna work?
Councilmember, I'm sorry, Bethany.
I do wanna ask if we can, strike from 9.2 required forms to be submitted with proposal, City of Seward business license,
No, that's in code.
and have it amended to say if, so, I mean, they could they acquire one if they were to get, I mean, everybody who applies now has to buy a business license if they wanna apply.
Well, let's ask the clerk what the current process is.
They have to have the license before they, in order to accept the contract.
Oh, so they could still get it,
So,
and then they get the, accept the contract. Okay, never mind,
They
thank
can
you.
propose without having a license and then.
so in there it says upon, I mean, like in some of the other, you know, when we go for other contracts, it says, if, you know, if you were, picked,
Successful.
you would need to get a sewer business license within so many days.
Okay, because it just says required forms to be submitted with the proposal.
Right,
So
that's
it-
in this later.
I'm sorry?
Tony, are you looking at the, sorry. was it-
Yeah, even in
This
the
is-
laydown it
Okay.
does.
It's in the laydown, yeah.
So we just need a parenthetical and say obtain upon success, obtain within 5 days upon successful notification, or whatever you guys do for that, right?
What the letter of intent, notice of intent will
Yeah.
be furnished.
Okay.
So, yeah, so questions, you know, you'll gather everyone's questions before the 5 days. You'll come up with something, addendum, you'll send out the addendums. Do you feel comfortable reaching out for input on the questions, or?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we could, I mean, I'm pretty sure we can work through it, but I did have one, we did one more thing about the intent. One of the things on there is, and Grant can touch on this too, about line loss. You can ask him how many companies would not apply, or maybe probably lots of questions about line loss. They have to hire an engineer, so that might be a question you might wanna, maybe Grant can answer.
Yeah, you know, so it isn't covered in the original RFP. It is covered in the laydown, and I apologize. I'm just kind of scanning the laydown on my phone. But it does cover in the third paragraph. It kind of talks about it. You know, that was one thing I struggled with personally when the kind of letter of intent came out and it was brought up, and we kind of discussed this in our meeting, you know, 10 days ago with the administration and the council members. You know, I'll be the first to say I am not a utility expert by any means. We don't audit any standalone utilities, you know, where there's rate studies and things like that. Your utility is a little different, where you're buying power. You know, you're not generating it per se. You're buying power from Chugach and then selling it. You know, we're looking at the balance sheet, you know, the P&L, things like that. But line loss, I think, is definitely going to be the hardest part of the RFP, or, you know, just looking at the laydown, or, you know, just kind of the intent and background. I think it's great that it's been expanded, you know, from 1 paragraph to 3, and it does talk about it in paragraph 3. But I think that's probably where you're going to get the most questions. Like I said, when we were first looking at it, you know, my initial thought was you might lose some proposers if you ask them to do too much outside of a forensic audit.
So I'm going to cut you
yeah, that's-
off just because
like,
we're running out of time, and I have a question for Councilmember Casagrande. What if we took that section out of this RFP and work with the new utility manager on maybe a separate contract and see how we can look at that specific item?
I just think that for a forensic auditor to complete a complete audit, they need to take into consideration the line loss. It's not rocket science. We do have a rate study that is already explained line loss. We have percentages that are explaining line loss. The question is,
So I
where
have
is
another,
that?
so we're running out of time, so I have another suggestion. What if we add that as an additive alternative and pull it out, and we'll see how much extra that would cost us? And have it still be in the RFP.
Okay, but just if it,
It would still be in the RFP, they would propose on it as an additive alternative, we'll see what that line item costs, and they would still propose on it, and then at that time, depending on the price, or if they're able to do it or not do it, that's when we would look at it.
maybe we could just add a sentence that says there's already a rate study completed that has found line loss and it is explained. As long as that's already there, so that the bidder doesn't think that they have to find transmission line loss, because we already know what it is. That's why I
Well,
put those
if
numbers
we,
in
if we
there.
RFP it, we would probably include that information, for them ahead of time as part of the RFP, I guess.
Ms. Mayor,
Yeah.
what time period are we looking at covering?
In the proposal, it's kind of open, 2018 and 2019. It probably, what's in here is placeholders for, I'm assuming that page you gave us for the breakdown of the line loss.
Okay. Yeah, let us go back and we'll see what we can pull to make the numbers a little more definitive for Councilwoman Casagrande.
I think the question is, like, I think it was somewhat explained and we see the numbers, but tell me if I'm wrong, but we just want to dive in and actually see, I mean, I think, the sum of the percentage going down was explained by LEDs and different things, and you're just looking for the actual reasons. Is that reading through that? More of a factual based? Council member?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
that's correct.
So instead of anecdotal, you're trying to really nail down into what the actual reasons for the decreasing line loss was.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, do you think that would be a good idea, is to have it as an addenda, or have it as an additive alternative? And
Yeah, and I think we can narrow the scope for Councilwoman Casagrande and get it to where it's more definitive for her on what is actually going in to the losses. So I don't know how you would want to handle that.
well, we have 1 minute to decide. So
Okay.
either we're getting this out, or we leave it in. I don't really care.
I
Councilmember
almost think
Rosinha?
they're two different things, and you're talking about two different specialty areas, I think. So I think they need to be separated out.
I agree.
I'm worried about losing people, but I don't know that that's true. Councilmember DeMoss?
I just think we should put it out how it is. I think it's a major part of the billing, and I think that they need to figure out and understand it in order to do the audit. So we need to know that the forensic auditor is understanding what
Grant,
what
you have
transmission
1
line
minute.
loss
If you
is.
have a comment, you have
Okay.
1 minute.
Yeah, and I'll make it quick. Yeah, I would just provide a little bit more information just so you don't lose any prospective people that are going to propose on it. I would just maybe exactly explain what you're trying to solve. I think currently there's one sentence about it. Maybe expand, here's the whole, just kind of what we're trying to figure out with regarding the line loss, so it doesn't scare anyone off. Because when I first read it, I don't know what line loss is, and that would maybe take a proposer out. Thank you.
Okay, so let's put additional information. Yep, we have 1 minute.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with directing administration to use the laydown that was provided tonight instead of the previous RFP that was written.
It needs to be changed
With
to
the
actually
changes.
have the city manager and.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Those are changes.
It doesn't go through the
We'll
clerk.
do those changes and then we'll get them back to everybody to look at it.
We have some additional procurement issues.
Okay, this is Cheryl.
That need to be
Can I say
understood.
something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, can I say,
Yeah.
I would like to, if Grant will not help us put that stuff together,
Actually,
also like Richie.
you know what, it's not done. There's too many unanswered questions, so we're gonna have to set a work session, because we didn't obtain what we needed to do tonight. So,
Okay, see you in a couple of minutes.
okay,
Well, now,
we're on to 7 o'clock meeting.
Can I get?
1 minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
can we
Yeah,
start
well-
a little late?
Yeah, we'll start a little late. We have 1 minute break.